I had not visited headquarters for 25 years when I intervened to resolve a conflict between two workers. One of the individuals involved, department manager Kenneth, became enraged with me and began to gripe. "Don't belittle me. Why are you here at all? An outsider. You and other worthless country bumpkins are not welcome here." A second later, Mr. Kingsley was standing next to Kenneth, his face red with rage, and he yelled, "What are you saying, Kenneth? Are you even familiar with this man? Hey, Mr. Kingsley, what's causing your distress? I take it that he's merely the new part-time employee." Kenneth's impolite comment caused Mr. Kingsley to sigh deeply, dismissed him, and bowed deeply to me. Eli is my name. I'm 48 years old, which is when most normal employees in any corporation would be at their best. I visited a phone app development company today. It was a tiny business that produced home video game software while I worked here. I was one of only 2 employees, and we use only our laptops to work on games in a small room. However, the firm took off after we began developing phone apps, and it has since expanded to the point that its headquarters are housed in a huge building in California that is so tall that looking at the top of it hurts your neck. They called me back for employment after I had been living in the country. Many youthful staff members appeared to have joined during my absence. I couldn't help but question whether they still required my assistance. I felt a shock on my shoulder as I looked up at the headquarters. A man in his 50s was staring at me when I turned around. We appeared to have run into each other. I stood in front of the entryway and said, "Sorry about that. The path was sufficiently broad for him to avoid me, yet it might have been my fault." The man snorted and looked down at me as I moved back and held up my hand in apology. I was a little annoyed that my return to headquarters had been interrupted, but I motioned him to move aside. With a heavy sigh, the man said, "Don't just stand around in the middle of the path like some clueless country bumpkin," and went inside the building. I dismissed it, pulled out my employee badge, and went into the headquarters myself. Where had the development section disappeared to? The number of years that had passed since my last visit was beyond my memory. I made my way to the upper floors to look for the development department, but I soon became disoriented because I had not visited headquarters for 25 years when I intervened to resolve a conflict between 2 workers. One of the individuals involved, department manager Kenneth, became enraged with me and began to gripe. "Don't belittle me. Why are you here at all? An outsider. You and other worthless country bumpkins are not welcome here." A second later, Mr. Kingsley was standing next to Kenneth, his face red with rage, and he yelled, "What are you saying, Kenneth? Are you even familiar with this man? Hey, Mr. Kingsley, what's causing your distress? I take it that he's merely the new part-time employee." Kenneth's impolite comment caused Mr. Kingsley to sigh deeply, dismissed him, and bowed deeply to me. Eli is my name. I'm 48 years old, which is when most normal employees in any corporation would be at their best. I visited a phone app development company today. It was a tiny business that produced home video game software while I worked here. I was one of only 2 employees, and we use only our laptops to work on games in a small room. However, the firm took off after we began developing phone apps, and it has since expanded to the point that its headquarters are housed in a huge building in California that is so tall that looking at the top of it hurts your neck. They called me back for employment after I had been living in the country. Many youthful staff members appeared to have joined during my absence. I couldn't help but question whether they still required my assistance. I felt a shock on my shoulder as I looked up at the headquarters. A man in his 50s was staring at me when I turned around. We appeared to have run into each other. I stood in front of the entryway and said, "Sorry about that. The path was sufficiently broad for him to avoid me, yet it might have been my fault." The man snorted and looked down at me as I moved back and held up my hand in apology. I was a little annoyed that my return to headquarters had been interrupted, but I motioned him to move aside. With a heavy sigh, the man said, "Don't just stand around in the middle of the path like some clueless country bumpkin," and went inside the building. I dismissed it, pulled out my employee badge, and went into the headquarters myself. Where had the development section disappeared to? The number of years that had passed since my last visit was beyond my memory. I made my way to the upper floors to look for the development department, but I soon became disoriented because the building had so many rooms that looked alike. At that moment, I saw the same man who had previously bumped into me. I was a little taken aback. He saw me too and said something right away. "Hey you, only authorized workers are allowed on this floor. No outsiders are permitted. Quit aimlessly and head straight to your part-time job." Based on my attire, the man must have assumed I was a temporary employee recruited on a part-time basis. Since I was dressed casually today, in a gray blazer, white shirt, and no tie, he most likely didn't believe that I worked there full-time. He waved me away as though I were a stray animal. "No, actually Here, we're occupied. Simply get to your part-time work." I was interrupted by the man's intense gaze, as though I were unworthy of his attention. He must have assumed he would see me get off the floor. I chose to follow his instructions and get off the floor, so I resigned. However, the man grabbed my hand and stopped me just as I was ready to hit the elevator button to walk downstairs. This elevator is exclusively available to full-time workers. The man, obviously having fun at my expense, smiled as he said, "Part-timers like you should use the stairs." I became irritated when I realized he only intended to further humiliate me, but I didn't want to start a scene that would only serve his interests. I forced myself to control my temper and gave him a composed grin. "Oh, is that correct? I apologize." The man nodded in agreement with my response. I took a quick look at his employee badge, which had the name of Kenneth, manager of the development department. Well, Kenneth, I'll keep that in mind. I made sure to get a good look at Kenneth's expression as I made my way to the stairs, even though I knew it was petty. I continued to descend the lengthy stairs, floor by floor, but after going down a few flights, I came to the conclusion that trying to go down dozens of levels on foot was somewhat risky. Since I was merely going down, I initially believed it would be simple, but before long, I was out of breath. It turned out that the closest floor was a break room, so I went outside to take a break. Beside it was a kitchenette with a microwave, kettle, refrigerator, and even a vending machine. "Thank goodness," I said to myself. "I'll take a break and then make a call." I quickly finished the iced coffee I had purchased after realizing how thirsty I was. Just as I was starting to catch my breath, I heard my phone ring. The individual I was going to call apparently just gave me a call. "Hello, this is Eli." "Where are you?" The person on the other line sounded shocked. "I've been waiting for your call," she said. "Don't worry about that. I'll send a car to pick you up if you just let me know when you get at the station." "Where are you now then?" "Right now. Well, I was about to say I was already at the headquarters, but I stopped myself. Since it had been so long since I last visited, I thought it might be a good idea to take a look around the company myself to see how things were running now and what kind of employees were working here. With that in mind, I pretended I hadn't arrived yet. "I'm not at the station yet, but I'll be there soon. I'll call you when I get there." I ended the call with that excuse. It had been 25 years since I last came to headquarters, so even the older employees like Kenneth didn't seem to recognize me. Thinking about that, I felt a sense of excitement, like I was a kid about to explore some grand new place. But I reminded myself that at my age, it wouldn't do to be so giddy. Besides, wandering around too much might get me mistaken for an intruder, like what happened with Kenneth earlier. With that in mind, I decided to explore the building discreetly. As I walked around aimlessly, I passed by a meeting room and heard raised voices coming from inside. "Let's stop this, Kenneth. Someone's going to notice." Intrigued by the tense conversation, I quietly approached the door to listen in. "Who you think you're talking to? I could have you kicked out of the development department by tomorrow if I wanted." Recognizing the voice, I peeked inside and saw Kenneth, the same man who had been rude to me earlier. He said he could kick someone out of the department. Maybe he had some connections with the higher-ups. As I pondered this, Kenneth stepped out of the room and made eye contact with me. "Quit wandering around like a part-timer. This floor is restricted." Kenneth shot me a sharp glare. But another man nearby spoke up. "Wait a minute. Is this the new hire?" "The new part-timer for the development department." "Great. Go get me a coffee. Hurry up." Kenneth, seemingly flustered from having his argument overheard, vented his frustration at me. I bowed my head repeatedly in a show of submission. "My apologies for the interruption. I'll get it right away." Satisfied with my response, Kenneth finally seemed to calm down. However, as he walked past me, he deliberately bumped into my shoulder before hurrying off. As I watched him go, the man who had stayed behind in the meeting room approached me. "Are you all right?" Kenneth can be pretty rough with both his words and actions. "Thank you. It's my fault for eavesdropping. But if you don't mind me asking, did something happen to you?" Remembering the heated argument from earlier, I asked the man. He gave me a troubled look, but after some thought, decided to explain. "Kenneth's father is either the CEO or a high-ranking executive here. We're part of the development department, but Kenneth doesn't know the first thing about development. Thanks to his connections, he was placed as department manager, though he always has his subordinates do all the work, then takes credit for the results, pretending to be a capable manager. His confession surprised me, but it also piqued my curiosity. That's awful. Nepotism. Huh. Please keep what I said between us." "I understand. I won't tell anyone. But don't you feel frustrated about having your work stolen? Is your work in development really something you take that lightly?" I had my own passion for development, which is why I couldn't help but press him on the issue, even though it wasn't really my business. "Of course I'm frustrated," the man replied. "But if I go against Kenneth, I could get kicked out of the development department. I love this job." He then grinned mischievously. "I've put up with Kenneth's antics because I love my work, but I've reached my limit. That's why I added a little trick to the data he took from me. Any developer could easily fix it, but there's no way Kenneth will be able to figure it out." His boyish grin made me laugh. "That sounds fun, but won't Kenneth try to get back at you for that? If that happens, I'll come up with another plan. You can't create good work when you're feeling stifled." Suddenly, the man realized he had been talking too much and looked startled. "I've said too much to someone I just met. I'd better get back to work." "Wait, can I ask your name?" "My name's Ted." "Oh, and I'll get Kenneth's coffee, so don't worry about it." Ted kindly offered to help, but I shook my head and simply thanked him for the offer. "No, I was the one who was asked, so I'll make sure to get the coffee. You should get back to work." "Well then, I'll leave it to you." Ted smiled warmly, gave me a small wave, and headed back to work. After seeing him off, I called the number I had pre-registered. "Hello, this is Eli." "Yes, how can I help you?" Naomi, my secretary, answered almost immediately after the phone rang. "I'm sorry, but could you bring some coffee to the development room?" "Certainly. How many should I bring?" "Just one will do." After hanging up, I started thinking about why I'd been called back to headquarters after 25 years. Maybe I was brought in to deal with this situation. If that's the case, then I'll have to rise to the occasion. I steeled myself as I quietly entered the development room. Inside, people were preparing for a presentation, with Kenneth at the front reviewing some data. The data on the screen was likely the one he had taken from Ted. Kenneth was so focused that he didn't even notice me entering the room. Just then, another man approached me, possibly thinking I didn't belong there. But as soon as he saw my face, he let out a surprised gasp. "Wait, aren't you? Kenneth's presentation is about to start." I gestured for him to be quiet, and once he saw Kenneth begin his presentation, he seemed to decide to join me in watching. Kenneth started explaining the data smoothly, and the audience nodded in agreement, clearly impressed. Given how confidently he spoke, it was easy to see why he acted so arrogantly. However, his smooth performance only lasted for the first half. Midway through the presentation, the data on the screen suddenly glitched, and then the screen turned completely blue. Huh. What's going on? Kenneth frantically tried to fix the issue, but all his efforts were in vain. The blue screen suddenly switched to a shooting game that began playing automatically, accompanied by cheerful music. What is this? Kenneth scrambled to stop the game, but unable to figure out how, it continued on. He was quickly defeated, and after the game ended, a short video appeared on the screen. The video showed clips of Kenneth slacking off, napping lazily around the office, shirking work, and making snide remarks to Ted, exposing his bad behavior in a series of embarrassing scenes. This isn't what it looks like. There's been some mistake. Even though Kenneth was in a panic, he kept trying to fix the data, but no matter how much he pressed random buttons, sweating profusely, nothing improved. In frustration, he slammed down the keyboard and let out an angry yell. Ted, what the hell is this? Your data is broken. Fix it now. The other developers in the room shook their heads in disbelief, while the upper management looked at Kenneth with shock. He had just unintentionally admitted to stealing his subordinate's work in front of everyone. The man standing next to me spoke up. So this is Ted's data? What are you thinking, presenting someone else's work as your own? Ted, could you shut it down? Following the man's instructions, Ted calmly walked over to Kenneth's computer and quickly shut off the screen. Instead of thanking him, Kenneth, shaking with anger, spat out his words. This is your doing, isn't it, Ted? As Kenneth prepared to lash out further, I spoke up, keeping my voice calm. Kenneth, that's enough. You don't want to embarrass yourself any more than you already have. Everyone in the development room turned to look at me, their faces full of surprise. But the most shocked of all was Kenneth, whose name I had just called. Frustrated, he directed his anger at me. What are you doing here? You're just a part-timer. Don't talk down to me. Where's my coffee, anyway? Useless country bumpkins like you shouldn't even be here if you can't do something as simple as that. As Kenneth advanced toward me, the man standing next to me stepped in. His face, red with anger, appeared beside Kenneth as he shouted at him. Kenneth, what are you saying? Do you even know who this man is? Ha! Why are you getting mad, Mr. Kingsley? Who is this guy? He's just a new part-timer, right? Whoever hired this useless country bumpkin is an idiot. Mr. Kingsley let out a deep sigh at Kenneth's rude remarks. Ignoring Kenneth, he turned to me and bowed deeply. My deepest apologies. Not only did you have to witness this embarrassing situation, but you were also treated with such disrespect. I'm truly sorry. Why are you apologizing, Mr. Kingsley? This guy is just a part-timer, Kenneth sneered at me. Mr. Kingsley was about to scold him further when Naomi entered the room with 1 cup of coffee and headed straight toward me. Excuse me, I've brought the coffee, CEO Mr. York. Sorry for the wait. Thank you. I'm sorry to have bothered you with this, I replied, taking the coffee from Naomi and handing it to Kenneth, whose mouth hung open in disbelief. Here you go, your coffee. Kenneth, who had been so confident just moments earlier, suddenly turned pale and began shaking. His legs wobbled, and his eyes darted around in confusion. Wait. What? CEO. Isn't this guy just a part-timer? What's the matter? This is the coffee you asked me to get for you, I said. Thank you, Kenneth stammered, taking the coffee with trembling hands. He sipped it quickly before placing it down on the table. The other employees, witnessing the scene, glanced anxiously between Kenneth and me, while Mr. Kingsley rubbed his forehead in embarrassment, clearly overwhelmed by the situation. At that moment, Mr. Sullivan hurried into the room. It seemed Naomi had informed him about the situation. When he saw me, he casually said, "Naomi told me," and I was shocked. "Why are you already at the office, and what's going on here?" In truth, I am the CEO of this company. I'm also Mr. Sullivan's nephew, and though I hold the title of CEO, I hadn't set foot in the headquarters for 25 years. So, it's no wonder the current employees didn't know who I was. The only one who recognized me was Mr. Kingsley, one of the veterans of the company, which is why all this confusion unfolded. I was watching the development presentation, but it seems like there are quite a few issues. So, you figured it out already. That makes things easier. Please, won't you return to headquarters? Mr. Sullivan's request caught me off guard. When I was still a student, I had developed a now extremely popular game with my uncle. With the profits from that game, my uncle founded this company, becoming the president while I took on the role of an advisor, aiming to grow the company together. As times changed, we expanded into phone app development, and the number of employees gradually increased. However, in my pursuit of perfection, I often gave harsh feedback, which created a tense atmosphere within the company. When I was younger, I couldn't handle the stress of not getting things exactly how I wanted, and I even yelled at employees in front of their colleagues. I made them work overtime for days to complete projects, which eventually earned me the nickname the Drill Sergeant. It was my uncle, then the president, who always mediated between me and the employees, diffusing the tension. Seeing the troubled expression on his face, I decided to step back and move to the countryside, leaving the big projects to the company. I focused on developing simple yet quirky games, living off their modest earnings. That was 25 years ago. By the time I looked up at the towering headquarters building earlier today, my uncle had grown this company into what it is now, all on his own. As I stood before the building, I realized that stepping away and letting the company evolve without me had been the right decision. I hadn't expected to be given the title of CEO at some point, though. Snapping out of my nostalgic thoughts, I turned my attention to Kenneth, who was visibly shaken. Kenneth couldn't hide his surprise at the fact that I, whom he thought was just a part-time worker earlier, was actually the CEO of this company. By the way, Kenneth, you mentioned earlier that you could kick Ted out of the development department by tomorrow. What did you mean by that? Oh, that was just a bluff. I thought if I said that, everyone would believe I had connections with upper management and treat me favorably. I see. It's impressive that you could convince people with such a lie. You've got a talent for persuasion. It's a shame you haven't put that skill to better use. I wasn't mocking Kenneth. While his approach was misguided, I was genuinely impressed by his ability to make people believe in his false authority. But upon hearing my words, Kenneth collapsed from his chair, falling to his knees and practically clinging to me as he shouted his apology. I'm so sorry. No, stand up. If you're going to apologize, it should be to Ted, not me. Based on that video, it seems like there's a lot you need to make up for. Kenneth slowly rose to his feet, his eyes red and on the verge of tears, and stood before Ted. Ted, I'm really sorry for everything. I was always jealous of how you, despite being younger than me, kept coming up with innovative ideas. I'm getting older and don't feel like I can learn new things anymore, so I invite your creativity. I'm truly sorry for everything I've done. Kenneth placed his hand over his heart and sincerely apologized to Ted. Watching this scene, Mr. Sullivan looked at me with a thoughtful expression, clearly plotting something. So, how would you resolve this, Mr. York? I get it, Mr. Sullivan. I laughed, then turned to Kenneth, who remained slumped. Kenneth, from now on I'm going to personally teach you everything about development. And if you're truly sorry, you'll work together with Ted and support him going forward. Wait, I'm not getting fired. It seemed Kenneth had braced himself for the worst, fully expecting to be fired after his rude behavior in Ted's incriminating video. But I don't give up on people that easily. I enjoy teaching people who don't know the joys of development. It's like playing a simulation game where you nurture talent. It's fun, isn't it? So, from now on, Kenneth, I'm going to give you a thorough education." As I smiled, Mr. Kingsley muttered under his breath, "You've still got that drill sergeant style." Ha! The drill sergeant. Kenneth, trembling like a newborn fawn, was clearly shaken. The role reversal from his earlier arrogance was almost comical, and Mr. Sullivan couldn't help but chuckle as he tried to wrap things up. Well, he did retreat to the country.
Lauren is my name. I used to believe that I had it all figured out. A young boy, a spouse, and a solid position as deputy head of finance at a large corporation. Although we weren't wealthy, I believed that we were content. Tom, my spouse, was a salesman for electronics. Therefore, his income was inconsistent. He would receive a hefty wage in certain months and barely make ends meet in others. However, we managed to make it work. We had been accumulating money to purchase a house for 7 years. I was adamant even if it wasn't easy. We deposited every extra dime into our savings account. Instead of dining out, I would cook at home, clip coupons, and purchase generic brands. Sometimes Tom would complain, but I believed he understood. That Sunday afternoon, it all came crashing down. Once more, we browsed through real estate listings on the internet. Tom's eyes brightened as he gestured toward the television. "Lauren, have a look at this one. It's flawless." I took a closer look. I have to confess, it was very lovely, roomy, contemporary, and with a large backyard. But my heart fell when I saw the price tag. "We can't afford it, Tom. It's much beyond our means." We'd had this conversation before, so I was expecting him to sigh and go on. But something inside of him gave way this time. He said, slamming his laptop shut, "Of course we can't afford it. We never have enough money. You just keep saving, saving, saving." Now he stood up and paced the space. "For Jimmy's schooling in the home, but where's the payback, huh? When will we be able to truly appreciate life?" "Tom, calm down." "No, I refuse to give up. Lauren, I'm tired of this. Sick of living on a tight budget, tired of never traveling someplace pleasant, and tired of dressing in the same old clothing every year. I'm worthy of better than this. I ought to have a better spouse in life." His remarks felt like a blow to the face. Tears were prickling in my eyes and my cheeks were burning, but I forced myself to swallow and didn't let them fall. "Tom, please," I responded, attempting to seem nonchalant. "Just inhale deeply. We must exercise patience since we are nearly there with our savings. Just relax and let's have a conversation about this." I was mistaken to believe that by soothing him with my words, we might have a reasoned conversation. With a furious expression on his face, Tom walked out of the room, slamming the door so forcefully that the windows trembled. After Tom's tantrum, I was under the impression that things would improve, but I couldn't have been more mistaken. Tom returned home the following day, filled to the brim with expensive clothing and a brand new wristwatch. I looked at him, perplexed. "What's all this?" I inquired. With a daring sparkle in his eye, he shrugged. "Just taking care of myself." "Do you have an issue with that?" I bit my tongue so as not to incite another quarrel. However, things only grew worse in the next weeks. Tom began squandering his whole salary on costly electronics, upscale dining, and hangouts with his friends. I couldn't contain myself any longer as he was leaving the house that evening wearing a brand new suit. "Tom, how are our savings doing? The residence?" His face steely, he turned to face me. "Lauren, life is too short. I have finished putting money aside for an uncertain future. Right now, I want to live." "But what about Jimmy's education?" I applied pressure. Tom sneered. "I accomplished well despite my parents not being able to afford my schooling. He's eligible for loans and scholarships. Besides, there's no need to squander money buying a house. we can continue renting. I was conversing with someone I didn't know well. The man I married was not this one. Tom became increasingly extreme in his actions as the weeks stretched into months. He began going out late almost every night. He would occasionally have unexpected business trips on the weekends, which had never happened in his years of employment with the company. Additionally, living with him at home was like living with a continuous critic. At meals he would snap, "Do you have to chew so loudly?" He would remark, "That dress makes you look frumpy," while I was getting ready for work. He used to throw his dirty socks on the floor and grumble, "Can't you keep the house cleaner?" Every day. I could feel myself getting smaller and smaller beneath his relentless criticism. I made an effort to communicate with him and find out what had changed, but all he did was roll his eyes and turn to go. Half a year. 6 unpleasant, protracted months of this new normal. My life was so unlike the one I knew before. The cozy, loving house I believed we had created together had become unfriendly and icy. One evening, I finally had enough. Tom had just done giving me a hard time over the supper I had prepared, which was once his favorite. "Tom," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "I think we need to live separately for a while." I expected an argument, maybe even remorse. What I didn't expect was the look of relief that washed over his face. "Yeah," he said, nodding. "I think that's a good idea." His easy agreement felt like a punch to the gut, but it also confirmed what I had been fearing for months. The man I loved, the life we'd built together, was already gone. The days after Tom left were a strange mix of loneliness and peace. I told myself this separation was temporary, that Tom would realize what he was missing, face the harsh realities of life on his own, and come back appreciating everything we built together. I was so naive. It was a Tuesday evening when my phone started buzzing nonstop. At first, I ignored it, focusing on helping Jimmy with his homework. But when the notifications kept coming, I decided to check. The moment I opened my social media app, my heart stopped. There at the top of my feed was a photo that shattered my world. Tom, my husband, was standing on a yacht, his arm wrapped around a stunning blonde with legs that seemed to go on forever. They were both grinning, the blue sea stretching out behind them. But it was the caption that really got me: "Starting a new life." I retreated to the kitchen, my hands shaking as I scrolled through the comments. Friends, family, coworkers. Everyone was asking the same thing. "Who's that woman with Tom?" Then 5 days after the photo appeared, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Tom standing there, looking tan and happy, happier than I'd seen him in years. "We need to talk," he said, brushing past me into the house. I followed him into the living room, my heart pounding. "Tom, what's going on? Who was that woman in the photo?" He turned to face me, a smirk on his face that made my stomach turn. "That's Vanessa, my girlfriend." The room seemed to spin. "Girlfriend? But we're married." "We're just separated. Come on, Lauren." He cut me off. "Let's not pretend our marriage has been over for a long time. Vanessa and we've been together for 6 months now." 6 months. The timeline clicked into place. His sudden change in behavior, the late nights, the business trips. I felt sick. "She's rich," Tom continued, oblivious to my distress. "And fun. She doesn't pinch pennies or obsess over saving. She lives for today." Plus, he added with a cruel smile, "She's a hell of a lot more interesting and beautiful than you." I want to marry Vanessa, start fresh. I nodded slowly. In that moment, I realized our marriage had been over long before this conversation. Maybe it had been over the moment he'd slammed the door 6 months ago. "Okay," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "If that's what you want, we'll get a divorce." Tom looked surprised, like he'd expected a fight, but I was done fighting. As he left, already on the phone with his lawyer, I sank onto the couch. The divorce proceedings were a blur of paperwork and legal jargon. Tom and I agreed on joint custody of Jimmy. I wanted him to have both parents in his life, despite the mess we made of our marriage. But even with the divorce finalized, I was far from okay. The betrayal, the public humiliation, the sudden upheaval of my entire life. It all hit me like a ton of bricks. I found myself struggling to get out of bed in the morning, barely able to focus at work. That's when I decided to see a therapist. Dr. Reynolds was a kind older woman with gentle eyes. "Lauren," she said in our first session, "what you're feeling is normal. You've experienced a significant trauma. But you're here, and that's the first step towards healing." Those sessions became my lifeline. Slowly, with Dr. Reynolds' help, I started to process my emotions, to understand that Tom's actions were about him, not me. For Jimmy's sake, I pushed myself to heal, to move forward. I threw myself into my work, started exercising, even joined a support group for divorced women. Bit by bit, I felt myself emerging from the fog of depression. Then Tom married Vanessa. I tried to be happy for Jimmy. He seemed to like her well enough. But things started to change. It began innocently enough. Tom asked to have Jimmy for a weekend, an extra day here and there. I agreed, wanting to encourage their relationship. But soon, those weekends turned into weeks. "Jimmy," I asked one day, "don't you want to spend more time here at home?" He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Dad's place is more fun." That should have been my first warning sign, but I brushed it off, telling myself it was natural for a boy to want to spend time with his father. As the months went by, though, Jimmy spent less and less time with me. When he did come home, he was different, distant, and he always seemed to have new clothes, new toys, stories of exciting trips and adventures. Finally, after yet another weekend where Jimmy begged to stay at his dad's, I sat him down for a talk. "Honey, what's going on? Don't you like being here anymore?" Jimmy fidgeted, still not meeting my eyes. "It's just Dad and Mom let me do whatever I want." I echoed, confused. "Yeah, Vanessa, she buys me cool stuff all the time. We go to amusement parks and fancy restaurants. It's way more fun than here." His words felt like a slap in the face. "Jimmy, you know we can't afford that." "That's the problem," he burst out. "You never want to spend money on anything fun. It's always save this, budget that. Dad says you're stuck in the past, always worrying about the future instead of living now." Things spiraled quickly after that. Jimmy started refusing to come home at all. When he did, he'd complain constantly, comparing my modest home unfavorably to Tom and Vanessa's lavish lifestyle. The final blow came on a rainy Tuesday. I'd been trying for days to get Jimmy to come home for dinner. When he finally arrived, he took one look around our living room and smeared, "God, this place is like a village barn compared to Dad's house. I don't want to live here anymore." The months slipped by, each one harder than the last. I watched from the sidelines as my son grew up, becoming more and more distant. Every time I reached out, I was met with indifference or outright hostility. Then came the day that shattered what was left of my world. It was Jimmy's 14th birthday. I'd hoped, foolishly perhaps, that he might want to spend it with me. Instead, I got a phone call that changed everything. "Mom," Jimmy's voice was cold, detached. "I need to talk to you about something important." We met at a cafe, neutral ground. Jimmy sat across from me, looking more like a stranger than my son. Then he dropped the bomb. "I want you to give up your parental rights," he said, his voice steady. "Vanessa wants to adopt me." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "What, Jimmy, I'm your mother." "No," he cut me off. "Vanessa's my mom. She's been there for me. She understands me. She and Dad can give me the life I want." He hesitated, then plowed on. "She can't have kids of her own. I want to be her son legally." I sat there, stunned, as Jimmy laid out their plan. Tom and Vanessa had already spoken to a lawyer. All they needed was my signature. Over the next few weeks, Tom and Vanessa pressed hard. Tom was triumphant, gloating. I wanted to fight. Every maternal instinct in me screamed to hold on to my son. But looking at Jimmy's face, seeing the determination there, I knew it would only push him further away. With a heavy heart, I signed the papers. The finality of it crushed me. I spiraled into a deep depression. If it hadn't been for my mother, I'm not sure I would have survived. She moved in with me, forcing me to eat, to get out of bed, to keep living. Slowly, painfully, I started to rebuild my life. I threw myself into work, started volunteering at a local animal shelter. Anything to fill the void left by Jimmy's absence. 3 years after the divorce, I met David. He was kind, successful, and patient. He listened as I poured out my story, offering support without judgment. When David proposed, I surprised myself by saying yes. As we exchanged vows, I felt a mix of joy and sadness. This wasn't the life I'd planned, but maybe it was the life I was meant to have. Just when I thought I had my new life figured out, I discovered I was pregnant. The news hit me like a tidal wave of emotions: joy, fear, excitement, and a twinge of sadness as I remembered the son I'd lost. David was over the moon. He'd always wanted children, but had never had the chance. We threw ourselves into preparing for the baby, transforming one of the rooms in our new house into a nursery. Oh, the house. It was everything I'd ever dreamed of and more, spacious with a beautiful garden and a view that took my breath away. Every morning as I stood in the kitchen, my hand resting on my growing belly, I couldn't help but think how different this was from the life I'd had before. I tried not to think about Jimmy. He never called, never answered my messages. But I couldn't help myself from checking his social media accounts. At first, I told myself it was just to make sure he was okay. But as I scrolled through photos of lavish parties, expensive cars, and exotic vacations, I felt a growing unease. The carefree boy I'd raised was gone, replaced by a young man who seemed to value wealth and status above all else. I watched with a heavy heart as he posted about peasants who couldn't afford designer clothes or complained about having to interact with common people at events. The final straw came when he shared a rant about how people below his level shouldn't be allowed in certain clubs. That day, with tears in my eyes, I unfollowed his accounts. It hurt too much to see what he'd become. Months passed, and our daughter, Emily, came into the world. As I looked into her tiny face, I silently promised her that I would never let her go, never let anyone take her from me. As Emily grew, we started taking family trips, nothing extravagant, just weekend getaways to the beach or visits to nearby cities. I loved watching Emily's eyes light up at new experiences, hearing her delighted giggles as David swung her around in the waves. Life settled into a happy routine. I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be constantly on edge, always worried about money or the next argument with David. With Emily, I felt safe, loved, and content. Then came the day that turned everything upside down again. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon. David had taken Emily to the entertainment center for some daddy-daughter time, and I was enjoying a rare moment of quiet, catching up on some reading in our living room. The doorbell rang, startling me. We weren't expecting any visitors. Curiously, I went to answer it. The moment I opened the door, my heart stopped. Standing on my doorstep, looking older and somehow both familiar and strange, was Jimmy. He was taller now, his boyish features sharpened into those of a young man. He was dressed expensively, a gold watch glinting on his wrist, but it was his eyes that caught me. They were hard, calculating, so different from the warm brown eyes I remembered. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice deeper than I remembered. "Long time no see." I stood frozen, unable to speak. Jimmy's eyes roamed past me, taking in the foyer with its high ceilings and elegant decor. He let out a low whistle. "Wow, nice place you've got here. Looks like you're not doing too bad for yourself." His tone was casual, almost mocking. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Jimmy," I finally managed to stammer, "what are you doing here? How did you find me?" He shrugged, a smirk playing on his lips. "Grandma told me. Don't worry, I had to work hard to get it out of her. She's quite protective of you." I made a mental note to thank my mother later and to have a serious talk with her about boundaries. "Can I come in?" Jimmy asked, not waiting for an answer as he brushed past me into the house. I stood in the living room, watching as Jimmy sauntered in and sprawled across our pristine white couch like he owned the place. "What happened, Jimmy? Why are you here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, it's a real soap opera, Mom. Turns out my dear old stepmom wasn't as devoted as we all thought. Vanessa divorced Dad and kicked us both out of the house. Can you believe it? That impudent gold digger found herself a younger model and decided she didn't need us anymore." I winced at his crude language, but he was on a roll now. "Guess I bet on the wrong horse, huh?" He looked at me pointedly. "Should have stuck with good old reliable Mom instead of chasing the high life with that." His words stung, bringing back all the pain of his rejection. But before I could respond, he switched gears. "But hey, water under the bridge, right? You're still my mom. We've got a lot of lost time to make up for." His tone was jovial, but there was something unsettling in his eyes that made me uneasy. I took a deep breath. "Jimmy, I'm not sure it's that simple. You chose to cut me out of your life. Legally, I'm not your mother anymore." He waved his hand dismissively. "Technicalities. Blood is thicker than water and all that crap. Besides," he grinned, "think of all the money you saved not having to raise me these past few years. It's only fair you share some of that now, right?" Right. And there it was, the real reason for his sudden reappearance in my life. "I'm sorry, Jimmy, but I can't just give you money," I said firmly. "I have responsibilities here. I have a daughter to raise." "Oh, so you replaced me, huh?" He interrupted his laugh, ugly and bitter. "Got yourself a shiny new kid and forgot all about your firstborn." I felt my temper rising, but fought to stay calm. "It's not like that, Jimmy. Look, if you need help, maybe I could talk to David about getting you a job." "A job," he scoffed, cutting me off again. "I don't need a job. I need cash. Come on, Mom, you owe me." "I don't owe you anything," I said, my voice finally hardening. "You made your choice years ago. I'm sorry you're in a tough situation, but I can't just hand over money to you." His face darkened, all pretense of friendliness vanishing. "You selfish fat witch," he snarled, jumping to his feet. "Dad was right to leave you. You're nothing but a nasty old hag who cares more about her bank account than her own son." Before I could respond, he stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. I sank onto the sofa, my legs no longer able to support me. Tears welled up in my eyes, spilling over as great heaving sobs racked my body. This angry, entitled young man. How could this be my Jimmy? Where had I gone wrong? Was this my fault for not fighting harder to keep him? Or was this the inevitable result of the lifestyle Tom and Vanessa had given him? I don't know how long I sat there crying. All I know is that when I heard David's key in the lock, I hurriedly wiped my eyes, not wanting to worry him or Emily. But as soon as David walked in, Emily toddling beside him, he took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "Lauren, what happened?" he asked, concern edged on his features. I looked at my husband, then at my daughter, her innocent face turned up to me in confusion at seeing Mommy upset. In that moment, I made a decision. This was my family now. Jimmy had made his choice long ago, and I couldn't let his reappearance destroy the life I'd rebuilt. The morning after Jimmy's unexpected visit, my phone rang. It was my mother, her voice a mix of worry and excitement. "Lauren, Jimmy came to see me. He needed money, so I lent him some. I thought you'd want to know he's okay." My heart fell. "Mom, please refrain from giving him any more cash. The Jimmy we knew has changed. All he wants is easy money. He has no desire to labor. Make me a promise that you won't give him any more." I hung up the phone and sat with my head in my hands at the kitchen table. I knew that this wasn't the end. As expected, my mother called again a few days later, sounding much more worried. Jimmy had returned and was requesting more cash. He got combative, yelling and beating on my door when I refused. The final straw was that David and I got to work right away. After dropping Emily off with David's parents, we spent the week at my mother's place. It was our turn to keep awake, alert at all times. On a soggy Thursday evening, the confrontation we had been dreading finally materialized. Jimmy arrived, banging on the door and yelling for money while obviously intoxicated. With David following on my tail, I opened the door. "Jimmy, you need to leave now." His eyes lacked focus and were wild. He pushed forward, "Not until I get what's mine." But David stopped him. Jimmy stumbled and said, "I'm warning you. I'll make you all sorry if you don't give me what I want." David then made a police call. Jimmy persisted in his tirade and threats as we waited for them to show up. In the backdrop, my mother trembled and clutched her chest. My heart hurt to see her misery and dread. Jimmy was swiftly taken away and subdued by the cops upon their arrival. I had an odd mixture of relief and melancholy as the patrol car drove away. I messaged Tom on social media later that evening in the hopes that he could assist Jimmy. He gave a chilly reaction. "It's no longer my concern. Vanessa stole everything from me and left me to cope with my own problems. Jimmy is by himself." I could feel the remaining strands of my former existence finally breaking as I read his remarks. I went to court the following day to get a restraining order against Jimmy. Although it was the toughest thing I had ever done, I felt it was essential to keep my family safe. Years elapsed after months. Jimmy was never seen by us again. Though sleepless nights decreased with time, life continued on. Occasionally, I would lay awake at night, wondering where he was and whether he was okay. As Emily developed into a bright and inquisitive little child, David's business prospered. I experienced a deep sense of tranquility one Sunday afternoon when I watched David pushing Emily on the swing in our backyard. My life was now like this, not flawless but full of joy, laughing and love.
"I need your space, Mom. It's time you figured out your next steps elsewhere." Juno's words hit me like a freight train. Standing in the doorway of my own home, I was confronted with a reality I had never anticipated. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, demanding I leave my home for her convenience. "Juno, this is my home," I managed, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "It's just with the baby coming, I need more space. And you have your studio, right? Can't you just find somewhere else for a bit?" Juno's tone softened, but her eyes were unyielding, a mirror of her father's stubbornness. Graham, leaning against the kitchen counter with a cup of coffee in hand, finally spoke up. "Eloise, maybe it's not such a bad idea. A change of scenery could do you good. We need to think about what's best for Juno right now. I looked between them, my family, sensing the divide that had grown over the years. It wasn't just about space. It was a culmination of years of bending backwards for them, of making sacrifices. My transition to freelance work wasn't just a career choice. It was a necessity to keep our lives afloat while Graham struggled with his career and to provide for Juno's ambitions. Best for Juno, my voice cracked, the weight of my sacrifice pressing down on me. And what about what's best for me? Does that not matter anymore? We're just asking for a little compromise for family, Graham added, his voice attempting warmth but edged with an expectation of compliance. A little compromise. I laughed, a hollow sound. That seems to be all I've ever done. Compromise my time, my career, my dreams, and now my home. Juno's gaze faltered, but her resolve did not. Mom, please, it's not forever. Just until I get back on my feet after the baby is born. I stared at them, the reality of my situation sinking in. My family saw me not as a pillar, but as an obstacle, an inconvenience in their lives that could be moved aside when no longer needed. Fine, I said finally, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. I'll go, but remember, actions have consequences. I hope you're prepared for them. As I walked away, I didn't look back. I couldn't. The pain of betrayal was too sharp, too raw. My own home, a place where I had poured my heart and soul into making it a sanctuary for us, was now a battleground. Graham and Juno's conversation faded behind me as I ascended the stairs to pack a few belongings. Each step was heavy, laden with the realization that my sacrifices had been for nothing. They had taken everything from me, and now they were taking my home. But as I zipped up my suitcase, a resolve settled over me. I would leave, but this was not the end. It was a new beginning, a chance to reclaim my life, my dignity, and perhaps, in time, my family, but on my terms. I will find my way, I whispered to the empty room. And when I do, I hope they realize the true cost of their demands. With one last glance at the home I had built, I stepped out into the unknown, the door closing behind me with a finality that echoed in my heart. The silence of my new, smaller studio apartment was deafening. Gone were the familiar sounds of my old home, the laughter, the arguments, the life that I had built brick by brick, only to be pushed out. I sat at my makeshift desk, surrounded by boxes still unpacked, the glow of my computer screen the only light in the room. The stark contrast between my past and present life couldn't be more apparent. And as I sifted through emails, trying to find solace in work, the doorbell rang, a sharp interruption to my solitude. It was Graham, his presence at my doorstep, both a surprise and a harbinger of unwelcome news. "Eloise, we need to talk," he said, stepping into the dim light of my apartment without waiting for an invitation. "What's left to talk about, Graham?" I asked, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. "It's about the house and finances. Juno's needs are more than we anticipated. We're going to need more help from you." I stared at him incredulously. More help? After everything? You're asking for more? It's for your daughter, Eloise. You wouldn't want her to suffer, would you? His words were manipulative, aiming to guilt-trip me into compliance. "Graham, I've given everything. My home, my peace, my life. What more do you want from me?" My voice rose, a mix of anger and disbelief coloring my tone. "Just think about it. It's for Juno," he repeated, his voice cold, the fatherly concern feigned at best. As he left, his words lingered in the air, a toxic reminder of the betrayal that had become my reality. They expected more from me, always more, never considering the cost to my own well-being. The following day, I decided to visit the house, not to relent to their demands, but to confront the situation head-on. The sight of my former home, now overtaken by Juno's expanding needs, was a stark representation of my displacement. Juno greeted me with a tepid smile, her earlier boldness replaced with a veneer of guilt. "Mom, I didn't think it would come to this, but we really need the help." "Juno, I've helped enough. It's time you and your father figure things out on your own. I've been pushed out of my home, asked to give up my life for you, and now you ask for more." My voice, though firm, was not without pain. "But Mom, where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do?" Her entitlement was evident, expecting me to solve problems of her own making. "That's something you should have thought about before. I'm your mother, not your fallback plan." Turning to leave, I felt a surge of resolve. No longer would I be the silent supporter, taken for granted and expected to give endlessly. As I walked away, I heard Juno's frustrated voice behind me. "You're just going to leave your daughter like this?" I didn't look back. "You left me long before this, Juno. It's time you learn what life demands." That night, as I lay in the quiet of my new reality, the idea began to form. If they expected me to give more, then I would. But not in the way they anticipated. It was time to reclaim what was mine, to show Graham and Juno the consequences of their actions. My contributions, my sacrifices, would no longer be invisible. They had awakened a determination within me, a drive to seek justice for the wrongs done. And as the plan took shape in my mind, a sense of empowerment enveloped me. They had underestimated me, but they would soon learn the true cost of their demands. My revenge would be my return, my reclamation of dignity, and it would start with taking back what was rightfully mine. My resolve had never been clearer as I embarked on my plan of retribution. The first step was uncovering the full extent of Graham's deceit. Over the years, he had masterfully crafted the narrative that he was the financial backbone of our family, a story I knew all too well to be false. But it was time the truth came to light, not just for me, but for Juno too. I began by meticulously gathering financial statements, bank records, and property deeds, evidence of my contributions, my sacrifices. It was during this search that I discovered something more insidious. Documents hidden away in a file I had never seen before revealed a shocking truth. Graham had been funneling money from our joint accounts into a private one I knew nothing about. The revelation was a cold, hard slap in the face, a betrayal that cut deeper than I could have imagined. Armed with this information, I confronted Graham, demanding answers. "Graham, what is this?" I slammed the documents on the kitchen table in front of him, the numbers and transactions a glaring testament to his betrayal. He looked up, his expression a mix of surprise and guilt. "Eloise, it's not what you think. I was saving that money for us, for our future," he pleaded. "Our future?" I scoffed, disbelief coloring my tone. "Or your future without me? You've been lying to me, to Juno, undermining my contributions, making me out to be the lesser partner in our marriage." Graham's attempts to explain were feeble, his words empty. "Eloise, I just thought. You thought you'd get away with it." I interrupted, my voice firm. "You thought I'd never find out. But I did, and now everything changes." The confrontation left Graham rattled, his facade of control crumbling. But for me, it was the catalyst for my next move. If Graham could betray me in such a fundamental way, then all bets were off. I took my findings to a lawyer, explaining my situation and my desire to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The lawyer, a woman of sharp wit and even sharper legal acumen, laid out a plan that was both brilliant and ruthless. "We'll begin with the house," she said, her eyes alight with strategic fire. "It's in your name alone, correct?" "Yes," I confirmed, a sense of empowerment growing within me. "Then you have more power than you realize. We can leverage this to not only secure your financial independence, but also to send a clear message to Graham and Juno." The plan was simple yet effective. I would sell the house, the one asset solely in my name, and reclaim the financial stability Graham had tried to steal from me. But more than that, it would be my declaration of independence, a demonstration that I was no longer the woman they could manipulate and betray without consequence. As I initiated the process, my interactions with Graham and Juno became strained, their demands and manipulations more desperate. "Mom, you can't do this to us," Juno pleaded one day, her voice tinged with panic. "Where will we go? What about the baby?" "You should have thought of that before," I replied, my voice devoid of the warmth it once held for her. "You both made your choices. Now I'm making mine." Graham too tried to appeal to my sense of family, of loyalty, but his words fell on deaf ears. The man I had married, the father of my child, was a stranger to me now, his true nature revealed in the light of his actions. As the sale of the house moved forward, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. For years, I had been bound by my roles as a wife and mother, my own needs and desires secondary to those of my family, but no longer. I was taking back control, forging a new path on my own terms. As for Graham and Juno, they would soon learn the true cost of their ingratitude and betrayal. My revenge was not just about punishment. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my independence, and my life. The day I left for the last time, the air was thick with an unspoken tension. Graham and Juno stood in the living room of the house that was no longer ours, their expressions a mix of confusion and anger. They had just learned of the sale, a transaction done quietly without their knowledge. "You sold the house?" Graham's voice was low, disbelief etched into every word. "It's in my name, Graham. My home, and I decided to sell it," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the emotional turmoil swirling inside me. Juno, her hands cradling her growing belly, looked from Graham to me, her eyes wide. "But where will we go? What about the baby?" "That's something you should have considered before demanding I leave my own home," I replied, the coldness in my voice surprising even me. "This is betrayal, Aloy's, pure and simple," Graham said, his voice rising in anger. "Betrayal?" I laughed, a bitter sound. "You want to talk about betrayal? Look in the mirror, Graham. You lied, you manipulated, you took everything I gave and asked for more." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging heavy between us. I turned to leave, my heart heavy but my resolve unshaken. This was the end of one chapter, but the beginning of another, one where I was in control. As I reached the door, Graham's voice stopped me. "You'll regret this, Aloys. You're tearing this family apart." I paused, my hand on the doorknob, without turning back. "No, Graham. This family was torn apart long ago. I'm just the first to acknowledge it." Leaving the house behind, I didn't look back. The finality of the moment was overwhelming, but beneath the sorrow and betrayal, there was a burgeoning sense of freedom. For the first time in years, I was free from the expectations and demands that had defined my life. In the weeks that followed, the reality of my actions set in. Graham and Juno were forced to find a new place to live, their comfortable existence upended by my decision. Rumors and whispers followed me in our small community, some sympathetic, others critical, but none of that mattered. I had taken a stand, reclaimed my agency, and in doing so, had started down a path of self-discovery and independence. My new apartment became a sanctuary, a place of peace and creativity. Work flourished as I threw myself into projects, my graphic design business thriving as never before. And in the quiet moments, I found a strength I didn't know I had, a resilience forged through years of sacrifice and hardship. The phone calls from Graham and Juno became less frequent, their attempts to guilt me into reversing the sale unsuccessful. Each call was a reminder of the chasm between us, a gap that had widened too much to ever fully bridge. One day, as I sat at my desk, the sun setting outside my window, I realized I no longer felt anger or bitterness toward Graham and Juno. Instead, there was a sense of pity for them, for their inability to see beyond their own needs and desires. I had moved on, building a life that was truly mine, free from the constraints of my old one. The sale of the house, once a source of contention and pain, was now a symbol of my liberation, a decisive step toward a future filled with possibility. As I looked forward to what lay ahead, I knew that the best revenge wasn't the pain I had inflicted on Graham and Juno, but the life I was building for myself, one where I was no longer a victim of their selfishness and deceit. The completion of the house sale marked not just the end of an era, but the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one where I stood firmly on my own 2 feet, unburdened by the expectations and manipulations of those I had once called family. My new apartment, once a symbol of my forced exile, had become a haven of peace and creativity. The walls adorned with my own designs reflected a life that was entirely mine. My freelance work, now more than just a job, was a testament to my resilience, a thriving business built from the ashes of my former life. During this time of renewal, I received a call from Graham, his voice a mix of desperation and anger. "Eloise, you've taken everything from us. How could you do this to your own family?" Family, I echoed the word, bitter on my tongue. A family supports each other, Graham. What you and Juno did was far from supportive. It was selfish. You're going to regret this, Eloise. You can't just start over and expect us to disappear. We're your family, whether you like it or not. I've made my peace with that, Graham. It's time you make yours, I replied, my voice calm but firm. The call ended with a click, his threats hanging in the air, but they no longer had any power over me. The weeks turned into months, and my life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The drama and turmoil that had once defined my existence seemed like distant memories. But I knew that true closure had not yet been achieved. The final act of my plan was still unfolding, a silent countdown to the moment when Graham and Juno would realize the full extent of their actions. That moment came unexpectedly. I had ventured out to a local cafe, a small luxury in my new life of independence, when I spotted them. Graham and Juno were seated at a table near the window, their conversation tense and fraught with emotion. "I can't believe she did this to us," Juno was saying, her voice a mix of disbelief and sorrow. "It's her revenge, Juno. She's made her point," Graham replied, his tone resigned. The sight of them so defeated and broken stirred something within me. Not satisfaction or triumph, but a profound sadness for what could have been. We had once been a family bound by love and shared dreams. Now all that remained were the shattered pieces of our once happy life. As I left the cave unnoticed by them, I felt a chapter of my life closing. My revenge, though justified, had come at a great cost. The family I had once cherished was no more. Their place in my life, now occupied by memories and lessons learned in the solitude of my apartment. I reflected on the journey I had undertaken from the depths of betrayal and loss. I had emerged stronger, more self-assured. My revenge, while necessary, was not the source of my strength. It was the realization that I alone was the architect of my happiness, the master of my destiny. As I looked towards the future, I knew that the best was yet to come. Not because of the vengeance I had exacted, But despite it, my life, once defined by others, was now my own. With each passing day, I would build it piece by piece into something beautiful and unbreakable. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and opportunities, but I faced it head-on with a heart full of hope and a spirit unyielded. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than I anticipated. A crisp morning breeze accompanied my steps as I approached the house I once called home. The real estate agent beside me, the for sale sign stood prominently in the front yard, a beacon of the impending change. Graham and Juno, unaware of my arrival, were about to face the reality of their situation head-on. As I rang the doorbell, my heart pounded with a mixture of anticipation and resolve. The door swung open, and there stood Graham, his expression shifting from surprise to disbelief as he saw me. "Eloise, what are you doing here?" He stammered, confusion written all over his face. "I'm here to show the house, Graham." "It's time you both faced the consequences of your actions," I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the emotional turmoil within. Juno appeared behind Graham, her eyes widening in shock. "You can't be serious, Mom. You're really going through with this." "Yes, Juno, I am. You both seemed to forget that this house was the one thing I had left. You took everything else from me," I said, the words laced with a bitterness I no longer bothered to hide. The real estate agent, a neutral party in the midst of our familial storm, stepped forward. "If you'll allow us, we have potential buyers on the way. It would be best if we could proceed without any complications." Graham and Juno exchanged a look of desperation, the reality of their situation finally dawning on them. "Please, there has to be another way. We'll be left with nothing," Graham pleaded, his voice breaking. "You left me with nothing when you demanded I leave my own home," I countered, my resolve hardening. "I warned you actions have consequences. It's time you learned that lesson." As the potential buyers arrived, Graham and Juno retreated into the house, their whispers a cacophony of regret and disbelief. The real estate agent and I led the buyers through the property, each room a reminder of the life I once lived, the memories I once cherished. After the showing, as I stood in the living room for what could be the last time, Juno approached me, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I never wanted it to come to this." Her apology, though heartfelt, came too late. "Juno, I hope one day you understand why I had to do this. Maybe then you'll forgive me, as I'm trying to forgive you." Leaving the house behind, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. The sale was more than just a transaction. It was a symbol of my liberation from the chains of betrayal and manipulation. Graham and Juno's future was now in their own hands, just as mine was in mine. The days that followed were a blur of legal proceedings and finalizations. The house sold quickly, the market eager to claim such a prized property. And with the final signature, I closed the chapter on a significant part of my life. As I sat at my apartment, the deed to the house now transferred, I realized the depth of what I had accomplished. I had stood up for myself, faced my betrayers, and emerged victorious. But it was a victory tinged with sadness, for in gaining my independence, I had lost my family. Yet, as I looked toward the future, I knew that this was only the beginning. My journey of self-discovery and empowerment was far from over. I had found strength in my solitude, resilience in my resolve, and a sense of peace in my decisions. Graham and Juno's path would be their own to forge, just as mine was now solely in my hands. Juno greeted me with a tepid smile, her earlier boldness replaced with a veneer of guilt. "Mom, I didn't think it would come to this, but we really need the help." "Juno, I've helped enough. It's time you and your father figure things out on your own. I've been pushed out of my home, asked to give up my life for you, and now you ask for more." My voice, though firm, was not without pain. But, Mom, where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? Her entitlement was evident, expecting me to solve problems of her own making. That's something you should have thought about before. I'm your mother, not your fallback plan. Turning to leave, I felt a surge of resolve. No longer would I be the silent supporter, taken for granted and expected to give endlessly. As I walked away, I heard Juno's frustrated voice behind me. You're just going to leave your daughter like this. I didn't look back. You left me long before this, Juno. It's time you learn what life demands. That night, as I lay in the quiet of my new reality, the idea began to form. If they expected me to give more, then I would. But not in the way they anticipated. It was time to reclaim what was mine, to show Graham and Juno the consequences of their actions. My contributions, my sacrifices, would no longer be invisible. They had awakened a determination within me, a drive to seek justice for the wrongs done. And as the plan took shape in my mind, a sense of empowerment enveloped me. They had underestimated me, but they would soon learn the true cost of their demands. My revenge would be my return, my reclamation of dignity, and it would start with taking back what was rightfully mine. My resolve had never been clearer as I embarked on my plan of retribution. The first step was uncovering the full extent of Graham's deceit. Over the years, he had masterfully crafted the narrative that he was the financial backbone of our family, a story I knew all too well to be false. But it was time the truth came to light, not just for me, but for Juno too. I began by meticulously gathering financial statements, bank records, and property deeds, evidence of my contributions, my sacrifices. It was during this search that I discovered something more insidious. Documents hidden away in a file I had never seen before revealed a shocking truth. Graham had been funneling money from our joint accounts into a private one I knew nothing about. The revelation was a cold, hard slap in the face, a betrayal that cut deeper than I could have imagined. Armed with this information, I confronted Graham, demanding answers. Graham, what is this? I slammed the documents on the kitchen table in front of him, the numbers and transactions a glaring testament to his betrayal. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life, my work, and my sense of self. The drama and revenge that had consumed me were now in the past, a chapter closed. I had emerged stronger, more independent, but the journey had left its mark. The lesson was a hard one, learned through pain and loss. True strength comes not from vengeance, but from the ability to move forward, to forgive oneself, and to find peace in the aftermath of turmoil. And so, as I continued to build my new life, I held on to that lesson. The future was uncertain, but I faced it with a heart open to new beginnings and a spirit healed from the wounds of the past. The road ahead was mine to shape, and I stepped forward with determination and hope, ready for whatever lay ahead. Years had passed since the house sale, years in which the silence between us had grown into a chasm seemingly insurmountable. I had moved on, my life now filled with new challenges and achievements, my past with Graham and Juno a distant if painful memory. It was a crisp autumn morning when I received a letter, its handwriting unfamiliar. The return address bore Juno's name, a name that stirred a myriad of emotions within me. With a deep breath, I opened the envelope, bracing myself for what might be inside. Dear Mom, the letter began, each word heavy with an emotion that seemed to reach out from the page. It's taken me years to find the courage to write this. I know I've caused you unimaginable pain, and for that I am deeply sorry. My actions were unforgivable, driven by selfishness and a failure to see beyond my own needs. I sat down, the letter trembling in my hands. Juno's words, so raw and honest, were a far cry from the daughter I remembered. I've spent a lot of time reflecting on my life, on the choices I made, and the people I hurt. It's been a difficult journey, one filled with regret and a deep desire for redemption. I understand if you can't forgive me, but I needed you to know that. I am truly sorry for everything, the letter continued, detailing Juno's life since we last spoke. She talked about the challenges of raising her child alone, of the hardships and the lessons learned along the way. It was a story of growth and change, of a young woman who had faced the consequences of her actions and emerged stronger for it. I'm reaching out not just to apologize, but to ask for a chance to start anew, to rebuild what we once had in whatever form that might take. I miss you, Mom. I miss our family, despite everything that's happened. Finishing the letter, I found myself at a loss. The emotions that coursed through me were a tangled web of sorrow, anger, and surprisingly, hope. Juno's words had opened old wounds, but they also offered the possibility of healing, of reconciliation. The decision to respond weighed heavily on me. Could I forgive her? Could we ever rebuild what had been so thoroughly destroyed? The answer was unclear, the path forward fraught with uncertainty. Days passed as I pondered Juno's letter, her words echoing in my mind. It was a conversation with an old friend that finally gave me clarity. Forgiveness isn't just for those who wrong us, she said. It's for us too, a way to let go of the past and move forward. And so I wrote back to Juno. My letter was cautious but open, expressing my own pain and the long journey I had taken towards healing. I spoke of the possibility of starting anew, not as the family we once were, but as something different, something new. Let us take it one step at a time, I wrote. Building bridges takes effort from both sides, and I'm willing to try if you are. Sending the letter was like releasing a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Whether Juno and I could truly reconcile remained to be seen. But the door was open, a crack of light in the long darkness that had separated us. The days turned into weeks, and eventually Juno replied. Her response was filled with gratitude and hope, a mirror of my own cautious optimism. We agreed to meet, to talk face to face after so many years apart. Sitting across from her that day, I saw not the selfish young woman who had demanded so much from me, but a mature, thoughtful individual who had faced her demons and emerged stronger. The conversation was difficult, filled with tears and apologies, but also with laughter and shared memories. It was the beginning of a new chapter for us, one marked not by the pain of the past, but by the promise of the future. Forgiveness had opened the door to a new relationship, one built on understanding, respect, and love. As I looked at Juno now, not just my daughter, but a fellow survivor of life's trials, I knew that the path ahead would not be easy. But for the first time in years, I felt hopeful about the journey we would take together, hand in hand, towards a brighter future.
The evening air felt heavier as I pushed open the door to our modest living room, the familiar scent of home now laced with the tension of the unknown. "Dean?" My voice, steadier than I felt, cut through the silence. No answer. The house seemed to hold its breath as I moved towards the kitchen, the heart of our daily life, now the stage for a revelation that would shatter everything. There, amidst the scattered evidence of a hastily abandoned meal, stood Dean, his back to me, frozen mid-motion. Beside him, Alara, my once trusted friend, her face a poorly masked tableau of guilt and defiance. The scene before me, stark and unambiguous, rendered words unnecessary, yet I found myself demanding, how long? Dean's turn was slow, his usual confidence replaced by a look I couldn't decipher. "Cadence, he started, but the weakness in his voice only fueled my growing storm. Alara spoke next, her tone brazen. "Why act so surprised, Cadence? You must have seen this coming." Her words, sharp and reckless, aimed to wound. The pain of betrayal, deep and acute, threatened to overwhelm me, but I stood my ground. "You were my friend, Alara, and you," I turned to Dean, "you took vows. Our son, our family, do they mean nothing to you?" Dean's attempt at justification fell flat, his excuses sounding hollow even to his own ears. "It's not what you think, Cadence. We just found comfort in each other." I finished for him, my voice cold, my heart colder. And you thought I wouldn't find out? Thought I'd just accept this? The confrontation, charged with betrayal and hurt, laid bare the fissures in our lives. Dean, struggling to articulate his rationale, and Alara, defiant in her role as the other woman, represented everything I had to fight against. This was not just a personal betrayal. It was a war on the life we had built, on the promises made in the presence of love and trust. As I stood there, facing the two people who had jointly dismantled my trust, my resolve hardened. This was not the end of my story, but the beginning of my fight. For my dignity, for my son, for the life I deserved beyond the shadows of deceit. I want you out, I said finally, my voice steady, my decision irrevocable. Both of you, tonight. Dean's protest was weak, Alara's silence a confirmation of her guilt. As they gathered their things, the weight of the moment settled on me. This was not just a confrontation. It was the first step towards reclaiming my life, towards a future where I no longer played the part of the unsuspecting victim. The door closed behind them with a finality that echoed through the empty house. Alone, yet unbroken, I knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of something powerful within me. A determination to rise from the ashes of this betrayal, to forge a new path on my terms. And so, amid the ruins of my fractured life, I began to plan. For justice, for revenge, for a new beginning. The journey ahead would be long, but I was ready. The morning after Dean and Alara's departure, the house felt eerily silent, a void filled with echoes of the confrontation. The silence, however, was a canvas for my determination, a stark reminder of the betrayal and the need for action. I started the day with a purpose, reaching out to Lara, an old friend, and the one person I knew who could help me navigate the legal intricacies of what lay ahead. Lara, it's Cadence. I need your advice, legal advice. Her response was immediate, a testament to our enduring friendship. I'll be there in an hour. We'll figure this out together. As I waited, I couldn't help but replay last night's events, not with sadness, but with a growing sense of empowerment. By the time Lara arrived, I was ready, armed with the facts and fueled by a resolve to seek justice. Lara's expertise was invaluable. First, we secure your financial stability and custody of your son. Then, we address the betrayal. Dean and Alara cannot just walk away from this unscathed. Her plan was meticulous, a blend of legal strategy and personal vindication. We'll start by freezing the joint accounts and filing for sole custody. As for Alara, it's time she learns actions have consequences. The strategy session turned into action quickly. Lara's connections expedited the legal proceedings, and within days, Dean found himself confronted with the reality of his choices. You can't do this, Cadence. You're destroying everything. His voice, once confident, now pleaded over the phone. This is the bed you made, Dean. Now you lie in it. I responded, my voice void of the affection that once colored our conversations. Alara's reaction was of similar disbelief, her previous arrogance replaced with panic. Cadence, please, let's talk about this. We can find a way to make things right. There's nothing left to discuss. You both made your choices, and now you face the consequences, I replied, the finality in my voice mirroring the closure I sought. With Lara's help, the legal battles were swift, leaving Dean and Alara reeling from their losses. But revenge was not solely about legal victories. It was about reclaiming my dignity, about showing that betrayal of trust comes at a price. The community's reaction only added to their downfall. Friends and neighbors, once mutual confidants, sided with me, their disdain for Dean and Alara's actions evident in their support and the isolation that followed for the two of them. As the dust settled on the legal confrontations, a new sense of peace began to take root within me. The betrayal that once threatened to define my existence now served as a catalyst for my transformation. I was no longer the victim, but the architect of my destiny, a woman reborn from the ashes of deceit. With the legal battles behind me, the victory felt hollow. The community's support, while comforting, couldn't fill the void left by Dean's betrayal. It was time to rebuild, to focus on my son and the future we deserved. Yet, the shadow of vengeance lingered, a reminder that justice served did not equate to wounds healed. My resolve was tested when I encountered Dean at a mutual friend's gathering. His presence, once familiar and comforting, now sparked a tumult of emotions. "Cadence," he began, his voice tinged with regret. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." The sincerity in his eyes tempted me to believe, to forgive. But the scars of betrayal ran deep. "Sorry doesn't change what happened, Dean. You chose this path, not me," I replied, my words laced with the pain and strength forged from the ordeal. The encounter with Dean was a turning point, a realization that while legal revenge had been exacted, emotional closure was elusive. It was a lesson in the complexity of forgiveness, in the distinction between justice served and peace attained. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my work and into being a mother. My son, innocent, in the wake of our shattered family, became my anchor, his laughter a balm for my soul. Through him I saw the possibility of a future unmarred by the past, a life rebuilt on the foundation of resilience and love. Yet, the journey of healing was not without its challenges. Alara, undeterred by her fall from grace, sought redemption in the eyes of those who had turned their backs. "Cadence, can we talk?" her message read, a plea for understanding, if not forgiveness. The decision to meet her was not easy. Face to face, the woman who had been my friend, then my betrayer, now sought my mercy. "I was wrong," she admitted, her eyes reflecting the weight of her choices. "I've lost everything, but I've learned. I'm truly sorry." The words I had longed to hear, yet their arrival brought no satisfaction. Forgiveness was a journey, not a destination, a path I was still navigating. "I appreciate your apology, Alara, but I can't undo the past, and I can't erase the pain. Maybe in time we'll both find peace." The days turned into weeks, each one a step further from the past and closer to a future I was still shaping. My world, once defined by the actions of others, now took form around the choices I made for myself and for my son. The legal victories and public vindication had faded into the background, replaced by the quieter, more challenging work of rebuilding from within. My journey was interrupted by an unexpected encounter with Dean at a community event. This time, his approach was hesitant, respectful of the distance I had put between us. "Cadence, I've been doing a lot of thinking," he started, his voice carrying a sincerity I hadn't heard before. "I know I can't change the past, but I'm here, trying to be a better person for our son." The mention of our child, the innocent caught in the crossfire of our decisions, softened the hard edges of my resolve. "He deserves the best of both of us," I admitted, the shared love for our son a bridge over the chasm of our past. This acknowledgement marked a shift, a door opening to the possibility of co-parenting with grace, if not friendship. The dialogue between us, once charged with anger and accusation, now treaded the delicate terrain of cooperation and mutual respect for the sake of the child who needed us both. In this new chapter, the antagonist of my story was no longer Dean or Alara, but the bitterness that threatened to poison my future. The realization that forgiveness was not a gift to those who wronged me, but a liberation for myself, began to take root. The process was neither easy nor immediate. There were days when the hurt resurfaced, a reminder of the scars that would never fully disappear. Yet, with each passing day, the choice to forgive, to release the hold of past grievances, became a little easier, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Amidst this personal evolution, a surprising ally emerged in Lara. Her unwavering support had been my anchor through the storm, and now she offered wisdom on the journey of forgiveness. "Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die," she reminded me one afternoon. "Forgiveness is for you, Cadence. It's the path to peace." Her words echoed in my heart, a mantra for the days when the weight of the past felt too heavy. And so I leaned into the discomfort, embracing the complex, often messy process of healing and forgiveness. The landscape of my life, once marred by betrayal and hurt, was slowly reshaping into something new, something hopeful. The process of forgiveness had led me down a path of unexpected growth, teaching me that even in the wake of devastation there can be renewal. In this new chapter, I found myself taking steps towards a future I had once thought impossible. My days were filled with the laughter of my son, the support of friends, and the satisfaction of personal achievements. The shadow of Dean and Ilara's betrayal had not disappeared, but had faded into the background, a part of my past that no longer defined me. An opportunity for a fresh start presented itself in the form of a new job, one that promised not just financial stability, but a chance to pursue my passions. "This is your moment, Cadence," Lara encouraged me the day I received the offer. "You've earned this." The decision to accept was easy, propelled by the desire to provide for my son and to prove to myself that I could rise above the challenges that had once threatened to consume me. "We're going to make a great life, just you and me," I whispered to my son, his small hand in mine, a symbol of our unbreakable bond. But life, as it often does, had more lessons in store for me. Dean's attempt to re-enter our lives, not as a partner but as a father seeking redemption, tested the boundaries of forgiveness I had worked so hard to establish. "I don't want to disrupt your lives, I just want to be a part of his," Dean said during one of our cautious, awkward meetings, gesturing towards our son. The complexity of emotions his request evoked was a reminder of the delicate balance between forgiveness and self-preservation. Yet, watching my son's tentative interactions with Dean, I recognized the value of reconciliation, not for Dean's sake, but for the innocent child who deserved to know his father. This period of adjustment was not without its challenges. There were moments of doubt, of fear that opening this door would invite back the pain I had fought so hard to overcome. But there were also moments of unexpected joy, of witnessing the tentative rebuilding of a relationship between father and son, grounded in cautious hope rather than blind trust. As the seasons changed, so too did the fabric of our lives, weaving a tapestry of resilience, forgiveness, and cautious optimism. The new job had not only brought financial stability, but also a renewed sense of self-worth and purpose. My son thrived in this environment of love and security, his laughter a constant reminder of why every struggle was worth enduring. However, life's narrative is seldom without conflict, and it wasn't long before a new challenge emerged, one that would test the strength of the fragile peace we had built. Alara, having navigated her own journey of loss and self-reflection, sought to re-enter our lives, not as a friend or foe, but as someone seeking closure and possibly redemption. "Cadence, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I need to make amends," she said during an unexpected encounter at a mutual acquaintance's gathering. The emotions her presence stirred were complex, a mixture of old wounds reopening and the recognition of shared human frailty. Her request for forgiveness, while sincere, demanded a level of magnanimity that felt almost insurmountable. Yet, in the spirit of the growth and healing I had committed to, I found myself willing to listen, if not fully ready to absolve. The dialogue between us was hesitant, each word measured, a dance around the pain of the past and the uncertainty of the future. "I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you, Alara, but I'm willing to try to understand," I responded, acknowledging the power of forgiveness to heal not just the recipient, but the giver as well. This encounter, though fraught with emotional landmines, paved the way for a new understanding. Forgiveness, I realized, was not an erasure of the past, but a means of liberating oneself from the chains of bitterness and resentment. In the midst of navigating these personal upheavals, a surprise development at work offered an unexpected opportunity for advancement, a testament to my hard work and dedication. "Cadence, your leadership and innovation have not gone unnoticed. We'd like you to lead the new project," my supervisor announced, recognition that filled me with pride and reaffirmed my belief in my abilities and in the promise of new beginnings. The calm that had settled over my life was deceptive, a brief respite before the next storm. Just as I had begun to navigate the complexities of forgiveness and the challenges of my new role at work, an unexpected development threatened to upend the delicate balance I had achieved. A legal notice arrived without warning, a stark reminder that the past was not as far behind as I had hoped. Dean, motivated by a desire to reassert himself in our son's life, was challenging the custody arrangement. "I just want to be a part of his life, Cadence. I'm not the same man I was," he pleaded over the phone, his words echoing a sentiment I had heard before, yet underpinned by a desperation I hadn't seen in him. The battle lines were drawn once again, not in the courts of law this time, but in the arena of personal conviction and the unresolved tensions that lingered between us. "Our son needs stability, Dean. Your actions have consequences," I responded, the firmness in my voice belying the turmoil within. This new challenge forced me to confront not just Dean, but my own fears and uncertainties about the future. The prospect of revisiting old wounds, of fighting once more for what I believed was right for my son, was daunting. In the midst of this upheaval, Alara reached out, her timing impeccable. "I know we've had our differences, Cadence, but I'm here if you need someone to talk to," she offered, a gesture that, months ago, I would have dismissed outright. Yet, the journey we had both embarked on towards healing and understanding had shifted the dynamics between us. "Thank you, Alara. I appreciate that," I found myself saying, surprised by my own willingness to accept her olive branch. As the days passed, the tension surrounding the custody challenge grew. Meetings with lawyers and mediators became a routine part of my life, each encounter with Dean a test of my resolve and a measure of how far we had both come, and how far we still had to go. The dialogue between us was fraught with the weight of our shared history, each word a testament to the complex web of emotions that bound us. "I'm not trying to take him away from you, Cadence. I just want to be a part of his life," Dean insisted, his plea a mix of sincerity and desperation. The resolution, when it came, was not a victory for one side or the other, but a compromise, a mutual agreement to put our son's needs above our own grievances. "We'll make it work for his sake," I conceded, recognizing the value of co-parenting in a way that provided our son with the love and support of both his parents, even if from a distance.
Every night, I strain my ears to hear her voice, a faint and secretive voice from the other side of the wall. I'm intrigued by that voice from the thin wall every evening. What kind of secrets is she hiding? Ah, look, I can hear it faintly again. Tonight, I pressed my ear against the wall to listen to her secretive voice. "My name is Chris, and I'm turning 28 this year. I work for an ID startup. I chose this company because I was impressed by the CEO who founded it. He started the company when he was in college. In no time, he rose to the top of the industry. Of course, he's good at his job, but I think his charismatic nature is what really draws people in. I would say that he is a people person. When the CEO convinces you of something, it's hard to resist." I looked up to him. Someday, I wanted to start my own company just like him and rule from the top. That was my goal. I've been working hard, and people inside the company think pretty highly of me. Even outside, a few folks recognize my name. I'm always grateful, because I feel the CEO favors and supports me. Then one day, the CEO personally called me in. I thought he had a new job for me, so I kept my spirits up before entering his office. After knocking, I heard his voice saying, "Come in." With a large window behind him, the CEO said, looking confident, "Chris, I have a job for you." He began without any preamble. "If it's something I can do, I'll give it my all," I replied. The CEO seemed pleased with my response. Of course, he probably never expected me to answer any differently. "I think everything's going just as he predicted. I want you to get married," he said with a solid tone. I didn't expect any refusal. I doubt anyone in the company could stand up to the CEO when he's this determined. "Understood. Who's the woman?" I replied, trying to stay as calm as possible. The CEO then made a call to summon someone. Since it's an internal line, it means the woman is an employee at our company. I had a hunch at this point. There's been talk of a woman rumored to be the CEO's mistress within the company. Of course, the CEO is a married man. I'm just being used as a diversion. Excuse me. After a polite knock, the person who walked in was just who I had suspected. An accountant named Catherine. I believe she's about a year older than me. For an ID startup employee, she's quite plain and unremarkable. I can only recall having brief business-related conversations with her. "Chris has agreed to everything, Catherine. You'll marry Chris." The CEO's words Catherine quietly nodded. She looked at me, tilted her head slightly, and said, "Pleased to be working with you." I couldn't read anything from that expression. It wasn't emotionless, but I couldn't tell what she was thinking. That's how I ended up as a guy who won the CEO's mistress. After a secret office romance, I thought the fake marriage would be just about living together, but we actually got legally married. Couldn't fool the HR department. The CEO provided a new apartment and furnished it entirely for us. It's a marriage with all the bells and whistles. I've decided to keep it a secret from my parents for now. I'll just wing it. If they ever find out, it'll be just a year. They probably won't hear about it in my hometown, out of state. The CEO's order was to divorce after about 6 months to a year, probably when his wife's suspicions cleared up. It's a fake marriage, so we have separate rooms, no intimacy allowed, just like roommates. We didn't have a wedding ceremony, we just took photos. She looked surprisingly beautiful in her white dress, which was a shock. The thick glasses she usually wears were the problem. I didn't know her real face until we took the photos. On our first night as a married couple, she bowed her head to me slowly. I'm truly sorry for all the trouble because of Jay and Sims. Please bear with it for a while. John is the CEO. His full name is Jonathan, I figured. So, the rumors about him having a mistress were true. All I could say was, oh, okay. If I can endure for half a year to a year, my promotion is guaranteed. But I wonder if she's promised something after that time. Does she intend to always live in the shadows? Such deep thoughts crossed my mind, but I tried not to dwell on it. I didn't want to get too involved. On the third night of our fake marriage, I woke up in the middle of the night. The beer I had before bed made me thirsty. I left my room to get water from the fridge in the kitchen. The hallway was pitch dark and silent. Then I heard a faint whisper. It was so soft I couldn't make it out clearly. A truly secretive voice. It took me a moment to realize it was Catherine's voice, because the voice was so unbelievably gentle, speaking softly with someone while occasionally laughing. John, don't laugh too much or he'll wake up. It seemed Catherine was on the phone with the CEO. Currently, it's 2:30 in the morning. They sure seem like they're sneaking around. I tried my best to walk down the hallway without making any noise. I didn't want to rudely interrupt their moment. Playing the role of a husband in a fake marriage is no walk in the park. I sighed, dropped on caffeine and the CEO's whispered conversation through the thin wall. I know it's ethically wrong, but this has become a habit of mine. Catherine and I continued our fake marriage. We barely talk even when we're both home. It's not out of boredom, but I'd like to dip my toes into their secret world every now and then. Maybe I could find some weakness in the CEO. Information is power in this world. The more you know, the closer you are to winning. Tonight, the two of them started their whispered conversation again. Through the wall, I could hear Catherine's voice full of compassion. Of course, I couldn't hear the CEO's voice. However, her comforting words seemed to be constantly cheering him up. And they also healed me. Are you okay? Are you tired? Are you eating properly? Such simple and kind words. I wonder if he was trying to make her laugh, but she giggled quite a bit. Even though they were in a relationship, I never heard them say, I love you. It was just her constantly worrying about him and cheering him up. It's a strange kind of affair. The change in our pretend marriage came about a month after our wedding. She figured out that I had been eavesdropping on our conversations with the CEO. Like always, after she said goodnight, she hung up the phone. I thought I could just go to bed. Chris, we need to talk. Suddenly Catherine's voice echoed through the wall. I froze on the spot, not sure how to respond. I considered playing dead, but Seren delivered the coup de grace. I know you're awake. Come out to the living room right now. It felt like she was negotiating with a hostage-taker. I gave in, leaving my room for the living room. Catherine followed shortly after. I braced myself for confrontation, ready to apologize. I looked up but was momentarily stunned, caught off guard. I forgot my apology and just stared. She was wearing what seemed to be her high school tracksuit, an emblem and a name embroidered on the matching top and bottoms. And she was wearing even thicker black rim glasses than she had during the day. It was quite a surprising look. After their intimate conversations, I was expecting something more seductive, but this had zero appeal. In front of me flabbergasted me. Catherine quickly brewed some tea for us. Eavesdropping is not acceptable. It's against the rules, isn't it? I was accused, and it irked me. Breaking the rules. A fake marriage is also breaking the rules. Hell, having an affair might as well be breaking the rules. To hear breaking the rules from your lips, Catherine, you sure can say that with a straight face. I intended to apologize, but ended up making a sharp retort. I guess the stress of this fake marriage had been building up. It's not entirely Catherine's fault, but I felt like all the blame was on her. I greatly admire the CEO. The CEO is not at fault. I'm well aware. This is a biased opinion. I follow my own rules, she said so firmly that I was left speechless. She gestured for me to sit on the living room couch. I sat in silence, facing her directly. It was the first time I'd really looked at her since this fake marriage began. Please, no more eavesdropping. It's an invasion of privacy. Hearing her straightforward point triggered me. I did agree to this fake marriage as a part of a deal with the co. They probably see me as a pitiful man who was led by ambition. Perhaps even looked down upon. Realizing this, I felt a mix of shame and unreasonable anger. I wanted to unleash all of my anger onto Catherine, who sat in front of me with a composed look. My clenched fists trembled with rage. Don't you have anything to say? Her matter-of-fact tone made my restraint fly out the window. What? Who do you think you are, acting all high and mighty while being the CEO's mistress? Without this fake marriage, you wouldn't even have a place here. I stood up abruptly, but she calmly looked up at me, lifting her chin just a bit. There was no emotion on her face. It seemed my words didn't get to her at all. You probably laughed behind my back, thinking I'm a low-life for accepting such a ridiculous deal for my own advancement, right? Pathetic. Ranting on, I was practically full with rage. This fake marriage made me despise myself for the first time. I feel like such a fool. Indeed, all the words that I lashed out at Kaffer and were what I wanted to hurl at myself. You should be proud of yourself, Chris. You accepted the dirty job based on your beliefs. There's nothing to be ashamed of, she said, looking me straight in the eyes. From her tone and sincere expression, I could tell she wasn't just trying to console me with empty words. Her words deflated my anger instantly, and I was taken aback. Chris, you're a man of conviction. Feeling weak in the knees, I sat back on the couch. How did she know exactly what I needed to hear? I'm sorry I took out my frustrations on you. When I think about it, Catherine is also a victim of the CEO's ego. Seeing her serious face, I began to calm down. You've heard the rumors about me and the CEO, haven't you? It seems his wife found out about them. Catherine explained everything step by step. I hadn't heard any details from the CEO. She took the initiative to talk to me, thinking it would be stressful for me in such a situation. It seems the CEO had Catherine and me enter into a fake marriage to deceive his wife. If we went as far as getting married, suspicions would naturally be cleared. It's apparently a matter of patience until his wife lets her guard down. Can I ask you just one thing? if I can answer it. I posed a question that had been on my mind for a long time. Are you the CEO's mistress? There are indeed rumours in the company that the two of them are in a romantic relationship. But that's based on minor things like seeing them walking closely together or meeting privately. There's no concrete proof of a romantic relationship. I wanted to clear this up. Catherine looked slightly troubled by my question. She seemed to be pondering the best way to answer, opening her mouth, then closing it again. She hesitated. How can I put this to make it clear to you? I'm not sure if I'd call it a romantic relationship. However, I do feel that the CEO looks out for me. I felt there wasn't a trace of deceit in her carefully chosen words. I see. Thank you for sharing. Her tone and sincere expression deflated my anger instantly. Here's a suggestion for me. Since it's a fake marriage, why don't we try to enjoy it a bit? Catherine looked genuinely surprised by my proposal. I've never seen her with such a shocked expression. She looked adorable, like a surprised squirrel. Oh, I don't mean it in a weird way. I'm talking about enjoying our 10 years of married life. It'd be tough to keep using formal language with each other for 6 months, especially since we work together. Being distant might come off as odd, don't you think? Catherine listened to me with a tilted head. Then, with a chuckle, she extended her right hand. Well, let's make the best of it, shall we, husband? When I shook her hand, it was small, and it gave me a slight thrill. Ever since that night where we had an honest conversation, the distance between Catherine and I has been rapidly shrinking. We commute together, and I eat the lunch she prepares for me. When one of us has to work late, we let each other know. Whoever has more free time handles the chores. Living together, you get to see sides of her you wouldn't have known at the office, like how she burns her tongue easily or hates mushrooms, or how she's not the best at folding laundry, or how she dreams of adopting a canine from a rescue centre. I love watching her laugh out loud at comedy shows by my side, but that's where my exclusive time with her ends. Late at night, she gets calls from the CEO. Whenever the phone rings, she retreats to her room for a private conversation with him. I feel completely left out. Every day the nights feel lonelier, and it bothers me. The CEO remains unchanged. He treats both me and her the same way as before. I was getting a bit irritated by his attitude. Did he really trust her? Or did he not think for a moment that she could fall for me? By the time half a year had passed, I realized I was in love with Catherine, but in her heart there was only room for the CEO. I was fully aware of that, yet I couldn't let go of that slight hope. I was told that this fake marriage would last between 6 months to a year. I was surprised at myself for wishing this life would go on forever. Time has passed, and it was halfway through our fake marriage. Catherine and I had a rhythm going, understanding each other's likes and dislikes much like a real couple. On weekends, she joined me in my passion for outdoor activities, even trying camping for the first time. Now she's eager to try solo camping. Lately, we've spent every weekend shopping at outdoor stores. For me, I've become a fan of the tea she brews after meals. She looks so dignified and beautiful, gracefully preparing her tea. When I expressed a desire to learn the art of tea making, she introduced me to a class, and now we attend together. After our tea class, we always grab some burgers together. She gets as excited as a child when I take her to a new tasty spot. I wish this happy life would continue forever. Just when I started to wish from the bottom of my heart, something happened at my office desk. I was occupied with loads of work today. I had plans to dine out with her. There's no way I could work late. That's when I spotted her sneaking between the desks. In her hand, she held an envelope and a list, probably collecting money for some occasion. Whenever there's something to celebrate or mourn at the office, Catherine, being in accounting, collects the funds. It was a familiar sight. "I'm sorry for interrupting your work. I'm here to collect some money." She stood next to my desk. "Is someone getting married or did something unfortunate happen?" I asked her while searching for my wallet. I could sense a hint of tension in her posture. She was behaving differently. So I looked up. Her face was as expressionless as always, but now I could tell she was desperately hiding her emotions. The CEO's wife is pregnant, so it's a celebration. My hand jerked in surprise, dropping my wallet, coins scattered on the floor with a clicking sound. The CEO's baby. But Catherine bent down to carefully pick up the coins. "Well, the CEO has been married for 5 years now. It's about time, right? It's wonderful news," she said flatly, placing the coins gently in my palm. "I'll come back later to collect. Take your time," she said, and left, her retreating figure looking smaller than ever. Watching her back, anger towards the CEO welled up in me. He tricked Catherine, pretending to be loyal to his wife all the while. Catherine had been waiting for him. What's the point of our fake marriage? I was suddenly filled with resentment towards the CEO. I need to talk to him. I headed towards the CEO's office. Just as I was about to knock, the CEO's secretary opened the door. He looked surprised and said, "Perfect timing." Apparently he was about to call me. Nodding to the secretary, I entered the CEO's office. The CEO seemed just as I remembered him, recognizing me. He gestured for me to come closer. "You've worked hard till now. I've arranged the position you wanted. The fake marriage is over," he said. Then he handed me something, a name tag with a new title on it. Among my colleagues, it was an unbelievably rapid promotion. It was everything I had aimed for since joining the company. "Aren't you going to be more excited? Now you can finally date freely. Plus, with this position, you'll have your pick of the ladies, right?" The CEO, however, his eyes aren't laughing. "You're no longer needed. I'll be taking Catherine back." Anger surged as the words left the CEO's mouth. Catherine isn't an object. The way the CEO casually mentioned taking her back infuriated me. Isn't she free to live her life? Do you plan on keeping her trapped and making her suffer forever? It was the first time I'd ever stood up to the CEO, but I felt that I had to say something. Pretty noble words coming from a guy who faked a marriage for a position. The CEO laughed sarcastically, looking at me with disdain. I might have been intimidated before, but not now. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I don't need this position because I have no intention of divorcing her. She's already my wife," I blurted out, staring down the CEO. The CEO frowned in displeasure. "Who do you think you are? You think you're in this position by yourself, and that you can have Catherine. Get over yourself." The CEO yelled at me. The usually composed CEO was yelling. "If you want divorce, you are fired. Can you really give up the position you wanted so desperately? You've always been so ambitious." The CEO, and I locked eyes, tension filling the room. Then, without a knock, the door to the CEO's office swung open. "John, don't my feelings matter to you?" It was Catherine. Her face wasn't its usual expressionless self. Her face crumpled, tears shimmering in her eyes. "Catherine, could it be you too?" The CEO's voice hardened at Catherine's expression. "I want divorce. I no longer need your protection, John. You have a duty to make your wife happy." With that, she turned and gave me a smile. I was taken aback and speechless. It was the first time I heard her true feelings. Chris respects my freedom. He teaches me new things and tries to share the same view as me. I don't want to wait any more for what's to be given. The CEO, after hearing her words, slumped into his chair and held his head. What did I do wrong? You said you wanted me to wait, so I did without laying a hand on you. I even proposed a fake marriage to protect you. What did I do wrong? Are you abandoning me too? She seemed to chew on the CEO's groaning words. John, you have to realize I'm just a convenient little sister figure for you, right? It's also hard for me to continue deceiving you with kind gestures. The CEO looked up at her, his eyes resembling those of a forsaken child. She wore a compassionate smile. I will become Chris's wife, a real wife, through sickness and old age. Always together. She smiled, and I nodded strongly. Our hands clenched tightly, hers responding with a gentle squeeze. Thank you for everything, CEO. I bowed to the man I'd always admired. Both of you, get out. Don't show your faces again. Leave the apartment as soon as possible. Energetically, we replied, Sure, as we exited his office. Catherine and I then resigned together and quickly moved out of the apartment. I'm glad that it was you that I married for the fake marriage, she said, this as we left the building. Let's look forward to starting today. The pleasure is all mine, my sweetie, she whispered into my ear, making me jump. I blushed, covering my ears, and Catherine burst into laughter. It seems Catherine always had the upper hand. I had a feeling I'd be under her thumb, but I thought it would be fun. As long as I'm with her, I may have lost the career success I dreamed of, but I gained something much more precious. I believe I'm the real winner in life. I will make you happy no matter what, I told her earnestly. She laughed and said, I'm counting on it. I'm willing to bet my entire life on meeting her expectations.